Hello and welcome back to the Avoid the Tyrewall podcast. Today I'm joined by a very special guest, Katherine Legge. Katherine, do you want to tell us a bit about yourself?
Not really.
No.
No, my name's Catherine. Obviously, I race cars. I don't know where to start about myself. I have been a racing driver for the majority of my life. I started racing go-karts when I was 9. I did that for 10 years. Then I progressed into racing open wheel cars like Formula Ford back home in England. And then I won a scholarship to move up through the ranks. Like, I wasn't from a wealthy family, or I'm not from a wealthy family, unfortunately. My dad wishes that it was different as much as I do, but I won a scholarship to race and did a few races that way. Ended up in America, racing Toyota Atlantics as my first full season here in 2005. So that was probably before you were born. I'm not sure. It was, wasn't it? So started racing in Atlantics, got the opportunity to drive a F1 car. I raced Champ Car and Indy car, went back to Europe for 3 years to drive for Audi and DTM, decided I missed the States and I wanted to come back and do IndyCar again. Found a home in sports cars, love sports car racing, have driven everything from prototypes to GT cars to electric cars to NASCAR to you name it, I've driven it. The only thing that I haven't driven that I really want to drive is Aussie V8s. And I think that would be really cool. So, yes, here we are, many, many years later, having driven everything under the sun and still very keen to do so.
So, obviously you've driven a lot, but where did your love for racing come from?
I think it was multifaceted, really. I was 9. I didn't really know anything about racing. My dad didn't know anything about racing. We went on a family holiday to Spain and had to go on the fun go-karts, and I wasn't tall enough to go. So I was very annoyed at this. I was a bit of an adrenaline junkie and a tomboy, and I wanted to have a go. I also was like my dad's sidekick, for want of a better term. Like, I followed him around everywhere and wanted to do everything he wanted to do. He was competitive. I wanted to be competitive. If he liked drinking tea, I liked drinking tea. Um, and yeah, so we got back to England from the family vacation, and my dad saw an advert in the local paper for our local go-kart track, and he and I went down there. He was actually the first one to get a go-kart, and I nagged him so much that Christmas, I found a shiny new, well, it wasn't new, it was used, but shiny go-kart under the Christmas tree that my dad had been working on in the garage secretly for weeks, bless him. And we raced together for a few races, and then he decided that he didn't want to do the same events that I was doing, because what if he got hurt? What if I got hurt? It was a whole thing. And then he just decided to focus on my racing. So then for the next year, like 9.5 years, he followed me around the countryside, setting up my go-kart, and I fell in love with it. He fell in love with it. He then also introduced me to Formula One, so I would watch Formula One on the TV. And I decided in my infinite wisdom that I wanted to be a Formula One driver.
Very nice. We've got one of the fan questions, and I know personally Kylie is a massive, massive fan of yours, and she wants to know, how do you mentally and physically prepare for a race?
Um, Good question. Hi, Kylie, by the way. Mentally and physically. Well, physically is a little bit easier to explain. So physically, it depends what kind of racing you do, but a lot of racing is quite physical. It's quite hot in the cars, especially the GT cars. So you have to do a lot of endurance training, which means bike, run, swim, whatever it may be, which is why you see so many of the drivers be triathletes.
Mm.
I personally run because you can run anywhere and you don't need any equipment apart from a pair of trainers. So I run a lot. I do interval training, running. I also do long runs. And then I do a lot of weights in the gym. I also, and people will probably not agree with this, but I also love to go to CrossFit because it's like a community and it's fun. And we get to do, like, it's a little competitive, but really we get to do different compounded movements. And so I do that as well as going to the gym. So I'm on tour days for 5 days out of the week, which is kind of ends a lot of training. But I also don't want to be, I never want to get out of the car and think I left anything on the table physically. And especially at the beginning of my career when I was getting into Champ Car, I think people were very much of the ilk that women aren't strong enough to do it.
Yeah.
And so myself and Simona kind of put that to bed because we were strong enough to do it. We are strong enough to do it. And now there's a whole other generation of drivers coming through that are, again, like struggling physically. And so it's tough. There's a fine line whether we make the cars easier to drive to accommodate women or we make the women tougher to accommodate the cars. Like, I don't know. I don't really know where I stand on all that because I had to do it the hard way. But I also want women to succeed in the sport, so it's a tough one. And then second element of your question, or Kylie's question, is mentally. Mentally is tougher than physically, but they also cross over, right? Like if you're physically fit and strong, then you feel mentally strong too. And you have to be disciplined and you have to be a lot of other things to be physically strong. So it definitely crosses over. There's a lot of mental coaches out there. I wish I had found somebody I liked working with early in my career because I think that confidence is key. And I think I definitely lacked confidence off and on throughout racing. And I think that's one difference that you get with boys and girls. Like boys seem to be blindly confident about everything, whether it's justified or not. Like they think they're God's gift to women and racing and all the things. And you're like, how? How do you believe in yourself that deeply? I wish I did. But it's a muscle, right? It's trainable, your brain. So you learn and you figure out what works for you and you fake it till you make it, and you know that positive thinking and digging deep and it's like anything, it's like if you keep doing something, like you keep telling yourself that you're good and you keep doing the work that you need to do to get there, and you are disciplined and you keep reinforcing all of those things, then it becomes real. So it's a tricky thing to get used to, and with age and experience comes wisdom with a lot of that. You also become way less emotional and you tend to think more strategically and logically and less reactively as you age and go through these experiences. I wish I could start all over again now because I would be a totally different driver.
Can you talk us through the atmosphere at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway for the weekend of the 500 and like the weekend before, where it's like qualifying and stuff?
I really can't. And I can't because it's indescribable. Like it is a energy that unless you've been there, you can't use words or adjectives to. I mean, it's just a vibe. I hate using the word vibes. But it is an energy, and it's absolutely. I mean, it's awe-inspiring, right? Like you drive in through the tunnel and you get goosebumps, and 300,000 people in the stands, and you look up and it's like it's just. I can't describe it. It's amazing. It is the most incredible thing I've ever experienced. And I experienced it for the first time. I think it was in 2005. And I was a spectator and I was in the stands in turn one. And it was my first year over in the States. And I had the same experience as a spectator as I do as a driver in a lot of ways, in that, wow, this is incredible. It's the biggest sporting event in the world. But yeah, it's just... And yeah, I guess you just have to go there. Everybody just has to put it on the bucket list and then they get to experience it for themselves.
It's my dream to go there one day, hopefully soon. but college and stuff is in the way.
Damn schoolwork. I think honestly though, like it's priorities again, isn't it?
Yeah.
So I think when you've got the means to do it properly and the time to do it properly, you'll enjoy it a lot more. So I think you should absolutely focus on your schoolwork right now.
How did the partnership with Elf Beauty come about, and how do you feel it benefited you and your career?
Ooh, so first of all, I love the partnership with Elf. I think it is one of the most meaningful partnerships in racing across the board, no matter what series you're in. I think it has changed the landscape for women in racing in so many ways. For me personally, it's changed it in that I can be something that I've never been able to be before, and that's probably authentic. Like before, I always kind of almost denied the fact that I was a woman. It's a real fine line, right? Like you want to play up the fact that you're female and you're in a male dominated sport to get sponsors and to get attention and to move on, but you also want to be taken seriously and be seen to be doing the same job that everybody else is doing. So yes, you're feminine and all the things, but also you kind of just want to be seen as a race car driver. So what Elf has done is given me the ability to be able to dance on that line a little bit more like my true self, because I am a girl. I do want to be seen as feminine.
Yeah.
I do want to be seen as attractive, and I do wear makeup and all the things. But I also can drive a race car and it can be pink. And nobody has ever advertised to women in racing before. And it's been a demographic that has been significantly growing. I think that they did not feel represented, I guess, in a way. Like, and now they're like, cool, there's a makeup company on the side of Catherine's race car and it's Elf. And I use their mascara, or I use their blush, or whatever it may be. Everybody loves Elf. It's like a cult, right? Like it's amazing. Once you've used their products, you realize how great they are, and they're affordable. So it's like it's just been a whole movement. It's been a whole girl power movement, and that's been due to Elf because that hadn't happened before, right? So I think that if you look at the numbers and you look at the significance that they played with all their activations last year, it's bonkers. It's so cool, and I'm blown away by how meaningful it is to so many people, especially me. But when you go to the racetrack, you cheer for somebody that you feel an affinity with and you can relate to, or the number, or the car manufacturer, or the sponsor, right? Like I remember when I was a race fan, I mean, I'm still a race fan, but I went to Brands Hatch with my dad and we watched the British touring cars. And my mum had a Renault Laguna at the time. So we were like, okay, we're going to cheer for the Renault Lagunas. I was dating myself. And so sometimes the sponsors on the car are like, okay, well, Elf. So I can get behind sponsor cheering for the Elf car, whether it's male or female.
I mean, like, personally, I'd be more inclined to buy Elf products because I've seen it on your car and stuff. Like, I've heard good things about the products anyway, but I would lean more towards buying it because of the affinity with you to it, personally.
Thank you. I've heard that a lot, honestly. And I've got a lot of messages, emails, social media messages from everybody saying we're buying Elf now because they sponsored your car and because that means something to me. And so that's incredibly special to think, A, I've had that impact with Elf, and B, that Elf have had that impact with me. You know what I mean? It's like a circle and we lift each other up. And so it's been really cool. And I don't think that you speak to I'm generalizing, but I don't think you speak to the female population by advertising products that they don't necessarily come into contact with on a daily basis. You know, like, oh, great. I don't know, like WD-40. I use WD-40. I love WD-40. But like, is everybody going to go out and buy WD-40 because they sponsor me? I don't know. But we all buy makeup on the regular, and so that works.
Definitely. Out of all of the cars that you've driven, which has been like the most surprising? So like faster than you expected or more difficult to drive than you expected?
I would say the that's a good question. I would say the GT car. The first time I drove a GT car was the NSX, and I'd never driven anything with ABS before. And so getting used to having less downforce, because I'd come from open wheel, less downforce and ABS and all the things, it took me a minute to get used to it. Once I got used to it, it was fine. But it wasn't one session. It was a couple of days, like, okay, I get my head around that. I think I've been really good about jumping into anything and getting relatively close to the pace really quickly. I've had a really diverse career, so I'm good at driving anything. But I think that probably that was the biggest change, just the ABS and the braking and everything else. But I was lucky that I was surrounded by a really good team and had really good teammates that sort of helped talk me through it.
That's very nice. What is the Pikes Peak hill climb, and how was your experience completing it?
So Pikes Peak is the ultimate hill climb. I think it's probably the most renowned one in the world, and it's renowned all over the world. And it's basically a really high mountain in Colorado where you can drive up in your road car. And if anybody's going anywhere near there, I suggest that they do it because it is crazy. It is a long road. And there is no Armco in a lot of places. There's just like 3,000-foot drops off the side of the road. You start off and it's warm at the bottom, and it's the middle of summer, right?
Yeah.
So it's 100 degrees and it's really nice, and you got shorts and a t-shirt on. And then it's snowing at the top because you've gone up so much elevation. And I had no idea that it was going to be as epic as it was. And the first time I did it, I'm like, this is one of the coolest things I've ever done. Like, you just can't, it's indescribable. Again, like Indy, until you're there and you're looking over the edge of a cliff and you're like, okay, somebody rolled down there one time, and it's life or death if you get it wrong, if the car breaks, if tire blows, if anything happens. Like, there's a high probability that you'll get really badly hurt or die. So it's scary. I mean, you have to have a huge amount of respect for it. And you also have to learn, I don't know how many turns it is, I should probably know this, but it's like, it's 11 minutes or whatever it is worth of turns. Like, to memorize all of those is a feat of like, I don't know. It's incredible anyway. It's really neat.
Can you describe, sort of similarly linking-ish to the last one, but can you describe how an Indy car feels when you're on the edge and pushing it?
Oh, okay. An Indy car has a lot of grip. So when you're on the edge and pushing it, it's like you've got an immense amount of load through the steering wheel. You've got an immense amount of G-force through your body. And you are getting to the point where it's about to break away, right? Like, whether it's understeer, oversteer, under braking, under acceleration, whatever it may be, you are on the edge of that load, let's say, for want of a better term. So it is like your eyes are on stalks and you're dancing with it, because when you go over the edge and it snaps in a pretty big way. So you don't necessarily want that. And also, when an Indy car with downforce is sideways, it's not fast. So you want it to be loose. Well, you want it to be free, because understeer costs you lap time more than it being free is. It does. But you don't want it to be loose. So it's like you're trying to play with all the tools that you have inside the car to keep it dancing on that edge.
I think, like, when you watch, like, I don't know, Indy 500 qualifying or other oval qualifying, it's like the most insane thing, like, genuinely. Obviously, never going to experience that. I've only just passed my driving test, but it's insane.
It is. But it's not like we would pick you up and plonk you in an Indy car.
No.
You earn your stripes. So, you'd start off in an F4 and then you'd go up to F2 or however, F3 or however you do it. And so you kind of learn the edge of each car as you're going along. And a race car is a race car at the end of the day. But it's it's not like, it's not like you have to do it at 250 miles an hour for the first time. You've been doing it for, a few years before that.
Yeah. So you recently announced that you're going to be participating in the 2025 Chili Bowl. Can you talk to us about that? Like, what is it? What are you going to be driving, etc.?
Oh, dude. Okay. I don't know what I'm doing. It's awesome. So I got the opportunity to do the Chili Bowl, and I'm like, yeah, because in America, it is grassroots racing at its finest, right? Like it is the Super Bowl of dirt racing, and so it's like the Indy 500 of midgets. It's like the Monaco of midgets, right? And I've never driven on dirt. It's
Mm.
got the same. It's basically the same horsepower as an Indy car,
Oh,
only you've got no downforce and you're sideways the whole time. You're driving it on dirt, and you sit very upright. The steering wheel is very horizontal. The pedals go into the floor. It's it's bonkers for somebody who hasn't experienced it before, like me. And these drivers are really, really good at what they do. It would be like picking one of those and putting them in the Indy 500. Like it is daunting. I have no ideas of grandeur that I'm gonna make it into any of the high up finals. But I'm doing it for fun. I think it will make me a better driver, and it seems like it will be a lot of fun. And why not? Like you only get the opportunity to do these really cool things once in your career, and so I'm running with it.
fair enough. Best of luck.
Thanks.
So you're like a trailblazer for women in motorsports. Do you like sort of see yourself as a role model for aspiring female racers? And like, how do you approach that responsibility? Like, do people come up to you and go like, I've started racing because of you?
They do, but some don't, obviously.
Yeah,
I don't think I ever set out to be a role model. It's something that kind of happens along the way that you don't really expect.
yeah,
But I think there's a certain amount of responsibility that comes with that. And I think you have to realize that you are an example to others and you need to do that responsibly. Like I would think about it like, would 9-year-old Catherine look at me and go, I want to be like her when I grow up, right?
yeah,
And so I love that element of it. I love to help young female drivers along the road, along the way. Um, and I hope that it inspires more women to get involved in racing in any way, shape, or form. It doesn't have to just be drivers, it could be in anything. I hope that my presence opens that door for them in some small way, like the people who went before me, like the Sarah Fishers and the Linton Jameses and the Janet Guthries did. And I, yeah, sometimes they'll come up and they'll say hi, and then I'll try and help them, and I'll start looking at what they've done, and I have a pretty good finger on the pulse for
yeah.
who's out there and who's any good. But some of them don't as well, and I'm like, I honestly don't understand that really, because I would have, and I did. I introduced myself to Sarah. I wanted to be my own driver. Don't get me wrong, like they always used to compare me and Danica, but I went and introduced myself to Lynn. I wanted to, they've been around, they've been doing it, they've got the t-shirt. There's definitely things you can learn from them. And so I did, and I formed friendships because of it. And so both Sarah and Lynn are friends who I can call for help and advice. And actually, the chili bowl is totally Sarah's fault, and she's taking responsibility for it. I blame her. She suggested I do it, and I was like, that sounds like a great idea.
Fair enough. I think like you're a massive inspiration for me, like personally. Like genuinely, like I was fangirling so hard when you said yes to being in an interview. But
Thanks.
I think I've kept it pretty calm today.
You've done a great job. I never would have guessed, but thank you. I appreciate that. That's very sweet of you to say.
Can you tell us about a memorable or defining moment from your time on the track?
Gosh, there's been so many. I've been around for a while here. Obviously, a couple of big crashes, were memorable and defining. And then the wins are too. And there's also been some losses that have been, where you have to dig in deep because it's not down to you. And there's been some races where I feel like nobody else could have done a better job in that car at that time. And I finished eighth, but that's all the car had in it at that time. So there's been a lot of those along the way. And there's also been blasé races where, you know, you finish decently, but nothing spectacular happened. And so I think it's just a mix. It's a wild mix.
Kind of, sort of linking to that at a bit of a stretch. What would you most like to be remembered for in motorsports?
Ooh, most like to be remembered for. That's a great question. I don't know. I think I would like to be remembered as really fast, really a really good driver, fair, um, smart, professional, all the things. But I mean, I look back and I'm like, oh yeah, some people aren't going to think that about me, and some people aren't going to think that about me. I think I think obviously it's evident that I'm really passionate about racing because I'm still here and I'm still doing it and I still love it and I'm prepared to drive anything with four wheels. Um, but I think that I did my best and that was a lot better than a lot of other people is probably as good as I'm going to get right now.
What's one aspect of your career that fans traditionally would not think about or consider?
I think probably fans don't see everything that goes into it on the back end. Like, I don't think that they think that we work as hard as we do physically, but not only that, I mean, I am lucky that I have the best job in the whole world. Don't get me wrong, but it is a lot of work. You sacrifice a lot. You don't really see it as a sacrifice because it's doing what you want to do. But where you live, relationships, um, there's a ton of things that you do because of racing, and it's a very unique career that I think isolates you from reality in a lot of ways. Um, and there's just a lot of work. Like there's a lot of hustle that has to go on to get rides, to find sponsors, to prepare for races, to physically prepare for races, responding to emails, doing interviews. You've got so many demands on your time and so many calls to make, and you have to be switched on all of the time that you're public facing, right? So that's exhausting too. I'm not generally a outgoing kind of person. I have to decompress and be introverted when I'm home. But I don't think people realize that we do actually work for a living. You know, like
Yeah.
it's pretty hard.
Yeah, like they see like the glamorous side. Because I mean, obviously you've up sticks to move to America, haven't you? Like that
Right.
is a pretty flipping big step.
I love it though. I love the state.
Given that you've competed in many championships like NASCAR, IndyCar, IMSA, how do you find transitioning from one car to the other?
I think it's muscle memory, and if you've driven
Yeah.
the car before, it's relatively easy to switch back into that mindset. It's hard. It was a little hard with IMSA and IndyCar last year because the buttons were all different. So I had to relearn the buttons every time I'd jump in or out of the car. Um, but like actually driving the car is not an issue because you feel it through the seat of your pants. It's just the auxiliary stuff, like right where is pit lane speed limiter. But it's not a big deal. If you're jumping in a new car, like NASCAR, for example, is relatively new to me, then you have to think a lot more, and it's always more effective and efficient when your subconscious does the work and your conscious mind is not doing the work. So I think once you've programmed your brain there, you're okay.
Thank you for watching this week's episode of the Avoid the Tyrewall podcast, and thank you so much to Catherine for agreeing to do this interview. See you next week. Bye.